What do I normally say at the beginning of a podcast?
Hanji.
So Hanji. Okay, Hanji. And welcome to another episode of the Not in the Clouds podcast. And it's been a long time. What have you guys been doing that you haven't been recording a podcast?
Yeah, life just took over, didn't it? It's been, 4 months since we had the episode with Balwant Ragiji.
No, but that was a really good episode. I mean, we got to grips with how Balwant Baji and Sachipashaji were pretty close and their relationship, and that was really nice. Balwant Baji fully took advantage of the opportunity presented to them, right? So Sagriji was there, the people who, were teaching at that time. I mean, that's pretty apt because we're recording on the day we find out that Ustaad Harbhajan Singh sadly passed away. I mean, all three of us have probably got memories with Ustadji, but all those teachers in Bani Sahib at that time, Balwant Baji really took the time to learn from them. Sagriji really pushed them to get all the vidya from them. And if you actually look at it, the amount of vidya Balwant Baji got as a single entity is immense. I mean, I know he didn't say it on the podcast, but I think we all know, how Shuddh his Gurbani is, his pronunciation of Gurbani, how his understanding of Rag, whether it be Shastri Sangeet or even the Kirtan Parampara that we've got, and just taking it forward to the next generation where, his children, Sonu Baji's kids are taking Sangeet to a level, right? And really, really got to appreciate that. But going back to Ustadji, I mean, guys, do you have anything that you want to share?
Yeah, Ustadji gave us so much love. I know anybody in South, they can attest to that. And I think obviously now, and obviously Ustadji deserves it, that a lot of the things that are going to be said about Ustadji are going to be related to Kirtan and Gurbani. But I think the one thing that I think we shouldn't miss is Ustadji's love for Sikhi. And anybody that ever either sparked up a conversation about Sikhi, or Ustadji could see that this person has an interest. As soon as Ustadji saw that somebody had an interest, Ustadji gave themselves to that person. For example, like formally, I wasn't even Ustadji's student. Like I never formally learnt from them or anything. At that time, I was learning Gurbani. And just because I sat on stage with Ustadji and I was reading Gurbani, and whether it was Shuddh or not, I don't know. I have no clue. But Ustadji saw something, and they would grab at that, and they would push you in that direction, and they would give you that blessing, that carry on. And just getting that from somebody like Ustadji. Like as an example, when I first started going to the Gurdwara, everybody knows I never used to wear pajama. Like I always used to just be in my kurta and my kashara. And just because I had listened to Sahu Pratap Singh Badesh one time that Sachi Pashi used to like if your pancha was like the correct, like you had got it stitched correctly. And just Ustadji, they had that love and they had that knowledge as well. And they said, "Ha, ye sahi kashara hai." And just hearing that from Ustadji, it means the world. Even just today, even finding out about Ustadji's passing, you remember all of those different stories.
We in Birmingham had, I think, a lot of access to Ustadji because their daughter, who was my initial Ustad Pavanjit Kaur Ruby, they taught in Birmingham, and you saw the love that Ustadji had through the way that their daughter taught, and to be able to motivate your kids into that kind of direction is a huge achievement as well. There's a shabad that I've got, it's a quite old recording of Ustadji. I think they sang it in Drupad, of Tu Jana Hai To Ta Koi Jana Hai, and the pace of Drupad and Ustadji's voice is so like different. It's you know it's Ustadji speaking when or singing when you hear their voice.
Now I think I can share this story. There was one time I was doing Ardas. So I'm doing the Ardas and I've said, all right, we've done Kirtan, we've done the Naam Simran. And I've used the word at the end, Anek Pulla Bakshideo. And for the general person, that sounds fine. Like it's good enough. And Ustad after I've done the ardas, I've gone and sat down. And Ustad says, "Aida na kaya kar," meaning like, don't say it like that. And I said, Ustad, what do you mean? You're going to have to tell me. I don't know what you mean. And Ustad says, say, "Huiyan anek pulna bakshte ho," so you're clear with Sadhguruji what you mean. Because the other way, it could have two meanings. I was like, oh no. I was like, Ustad, I didn't mean that, I promise. And Ustad is saying, no, I understand. I can make you feel better. I'll one-up you. And I said, "Theek hai, dasso." They said one time they was doing kirtan with Sadhguru Singh Ji, and there wasn't a lot of sangat. So Sadhguru Singh Ji, Maharaj Ji, and only select raggis, and they were doing kirtan after the Shamda Nityanam. And all the time, Purbaji would get told to do the ardas. And Ustadi said, we were all used to that we have different duties. Like, I'm the kirtan person, and he's the ardas person. So the program's finished, and Sacha Pashaji straight away just points at Ustadi and says, you do the ardas. And Ustadi is saying, you only find out how nerve-wracking it is to do the ardas when you get told to do it for the first time. So it's like, we've done all this kirtan. At that time, there was no I Gurbani, so they had all of this Gurbani Kant memorized. And he says, as soon as it came to doing the ardas, my legs start shaking. So he's doing, he says, I'm doing the ardas, and he says, okay, I've got past all the Gurus' names, I've remembered all the shaheeds, I'm on the home straight. And he says, I get to the bit where you are going to say, okay, we've done this X, Y, Z. He says, Sache Pasha ji, kirtan hoya hai, badi galti ho gayi. And for those that don't understand Punjabi, meaning we've just finished the kirtan, we've made a massive mistake. And he says it was the first time in my life where I always saw that Sadhguru Singh used to be very serious and in their mode of concentration when there was the ardas. And it's the first time they saw such a crack a smile during the ardas. And this was Ustadi's way of telling you the correct thing, but also then using his own life experience to say, look, I'm not telling you this from a position of I'm telling you you're wrong. I'm telling it to you from a position that I've made the same mistakes. And I'm not going to put myself on a pedestal to tell you. And I think that encapsulated Ustad, for me anyway, my experiences with him.
I think only a really great teacher can do that by making them a part of you, making themselves a part of your journey, and you feeling like they're there to support you instead of they're there to judge you.
Whether there was 3 people in the Sangat or whether there was 123 people in the Sangat, I think Ustadji connected with everyone and connected with the Sangat in such a way. I mean, every Saturday night they used to, or during the day on Saturday, they used to travel from Leeds to Southall. And for those that are not in the UK, that's probably about 200 odd miles, right? It's a long time. It's a 4-hour journey on a coach. They used to leave Leeds at about 4 o'clock in the morning, reach Golders Green at about 11:30, 12 o'clock. Well, that's more than 4 hours there. And then they used to go and teach whoever wanted to learn. And I was fortunate to pick them up a few times from Golders Green, and the conversations on the way back. And, I've always been fond of, old Kirtan. So showing them sort of older recordings that I might have stumbled upon that week, or having conversations about the old Raggis and how Kirtan was done and is done now. I felt that I learned a lot. And then them knowing, like Ustadji knowing that, I had a particular interest in sort of Drupad Kirtan and playing Jodi, I got to accompany them quite a bit.
What was that like? Because every artist has a stage persona, but what was theirs like when you were performing with them?
Ustadji's persona, that is, I think everyone knows that Ustadji had a massive sense of humor, whether it was on stage or off stage. I think they made you feel at ease. And the first few times that I accompanied them, I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they were as a personality. All I knew that is, I really liked the Kirtan. I was pretty young at that time. And then growing into that and actually understanding, and I remember so many Rita hearing them for the first time. I mean, Bapad Govindai, the Asa Bandish in the morning. I still remember where Ustadji sang that, how they sang that, and in which, I mean, it was in Asa Diwar, but at what time they sang it and after which shakka, and how they explained to me how to play with that shabad. It's an old reed, it's a difficult old reed to play with. It's a very slow tempo. So things like this, I mean, we're going to miss massively in the UK. And I think it's apt for the topic that we're going to talk about today. So, I mean, we're going to talk about how to live with ego in ego, how to sort of manage that on a day-to-day basis, and what ego actually is. I was talking to a couple of friends the other day, and I was saying, you know, modern gatha, it's really hard. I think I was talking to you, Juan Singh, about this as well. Like gatha is really hard to understand because it's like a continuous prose. It's almost like somebody's telling you a narrative. But I think having a conversation and almost this level of vichar about a topic, I think the podcast nature of that has made this sort of more accessible for, you know, changing your thoughts or actually even questioning yourself. So I think my question to you guys is now, what is ego for you guys? What do you actually define as ego? Because then if we set a loose definition, we can touch upon that later on if we open this up.
I think, it's like when we was discussing it really, and I think Satya Pasha really shone a light on this in terms of how it is presented. That sometimes we confuse what we mean when we're spiritually talking about ego and what we're talking about in our day-to-day life when we're talking about ego. And even the amount of, you could say, adjectives or verbs that are explaining kind of the byproduct of how ego is affecting us. Like we was using words like pride, jealousy, animosity towards others, all of these different words that we could use to kind of explain it. Like in some places it's saying the word homa, some places it's using the word ahankar or aham. So I think kind of what we want to try and do is break that apart one by one, and not jump straight to what ego is from a spiritual perspective, because I don't think it's too difficult to then connect yourself to it.
Ego is the voice in my head. It's that sort of I, me, mine. Like, why isn't that happening to me? Or why did that happen to me? Or, you know, things like that. It's not sort of inherently bad. And I guess as we were sort of alluding to at the beginning, Ase, where it's not inherently bad and it could be deemed as like confidence, or even it could help with survival in some scenarios. But what is that line drawn, and where is that sort of, is it a grey boundary, or what does it look like?
So let's have a think about this, right? So from day dot, when you were born, your parents gave you an identity, and that identity came in the form of a name. You had no option to pick that name, but you were called Sarab, I was called Asa, and Jwant was called Jwant. And then later on in life, that name then has different associations. That name is somebody who is cheeky, somebody who is outspoken, somebody who is confident. And these labels develop and grow as you grow and develop. In primary school, you could be the kid that eats sand, for example, and in secondary school you might be the kid that never comes out at lunchtime, and these labels grow with you and becomes a self-reflection, or becomes an identity that you relate to. It's, in my opinion, it's a story that's been developing every single day since consciousness. All I am is a collection of experiences that I've gone through in my life that has led to me being this version of me. Because any deviation from what your life took to get to this point would have made you a different type of you. The attachment to then that I was this 5 years ago, or this is what I think now, the attachment to that, I think, is the ego. That I think this way and this is the way that it has to be. I speak to these people because I get along with them, or I don't get along with these people, that's why I don't speak to them. That's the ego reinforcing itself. Whereas I think a person who is more flexible and adaptable in everyday situations and is willing to have their opinion challenged is more aware of their ego, maybe consciously or subconsciously. So I think the definition of ego for me is more subtle than just being egotistical, prideful of your achievements. It's more this building of a body that you've built over the course of 30, 40 years that you've existed on this earth. And each brick is a characteristic that you think is yours. Each item of clothing that you think represents who you are as a person. That's ego for me.
We had like this old Sony Handycam, and it had all the old school like ways of recording, so none of it was like digital. It's still on the disc. And I was feeling quite nostalgic, and I was thinking, oh, where are all of those? Because we have videos on there from like 2006. So you plug it in, and I put it on, and then all of a sudden you see a version of yourself in those videos. And you're looking at that person, and you know it's you because you've seen pictures of yourself from when you were that age. But really and genuinely, you look at that version of yourself, and part of you thinks that is me, and part of you thinks that's not me, because I don't look like that anymore. And I found that quite interesting, because really consciously, what is connecting it is me consciously, because I know that's me. But because of the physical difference, you look at that as this separate entity. Any text that's kind of worthwhile in terms of reading, it always starts with a question. You read anything, it always starts with a question. These questions, if you read the Granths over time, the questions from a worldly perspective has changed. Like, for example, back in the day, the questions about transport were different to how we would talk about transport now. But the core questions of spirituality have stayed the same. And it's quite funny because it's the same consciousness. And I related that to that video of myself, that I know that's me. I can't connect to it because it doesn't look like me anymore. But I know it's the same consciousness. And I have those same questions. Who am I? What is this world? These walls that we build up around us becomes our defense mechanism. And we start internalizing that this is me, whereas actually what is me is something that is even beyond those things, which we can open up in a second. But let's just start with that we create these walls around us, and each brick is what we consider that this is mine, whether it's your identity, the things you like. And I think that because people get worried about this, and I can understand that because it comes up in Gurbani all the time, where Guru Nanak Dev Pasha Ji is saying your pekh, meaning your religious garb, is what is causing pain to your body. Bahu pekh kiya, dehi dukh diya. Sachi Pasha again and again is talking to these people and parring them for giving such prominence to their religious garb, again and again. If Sachi Pasha Ji in that from that perspective, Sachi Pasha Ji would do that to us. And the reason for that is all of these things were meant to be vehicles. They were all meant to try and help us get to somewhere. But what we do is we again make that garb, we make that outwards appearance, and we start hugging that. We start thinking and internalizing that to such an extent where it hinders you from growing spiritually. So I think one thing to not get confused is we're not saying that these things aren't important. They are important, but I think Satya Pashaji is trying to say is don't let that be your goalpost. Don't let that be your ultimate aim.
I feel that we've gone down the spiritual route quickly. How do we realize when our ego, so this false vision of ourselves, or it might not even be false, but this vision of ourselves is in control? How do we know that it's the ego that's controlling rather than the other thing that we're also talking about or could be talking about is how do we know it's not hukam?
Let's say as a human instinct, we can recognize it in other people. For example, day to day, like we will say to that person, oh, that person, he's got a big ego. I just had this conversation with this person. I felt that that person was talking with a massive ego. That person is too full of themselves. So we're really good at recognizing it in other people. And I think what we're trying to get at is, when do you get to that point where you start recognizing it in yourself?
Like you say, John, there's definitely markers, right, to look out for. And by starting it from like looking at other people's, you can definitely then use those same markers in yourself. There's things like comparison, like John said, when you feel like you're comparing yourself or somebody you think is better or worse than you. That's a marker. When you feel like your identity is rigid, when you feel like I am the failure, or you feel like they are the failure, when you feel like you're being defensive or hurt by someone's opinion. There's also a marker that if you feel like you have to prove yourself or assert yourself to show that you're in control. The reflection on that is who is actually in control, but that's a whole different.
Some things that I've noticed over the last couple of weeks whilst we've been talking about this is arguing just to sort of win and not to understand.
yeah.
I'm laughing because we probably have done this, right? Where I would say something just to sort of get a reaction at times, and I don't really care or want to understand what anyone else has got to say, but I just want to be right at times. And then on the opposite, on the polar of that, it's the feeling attacked when someone disagrees. Like if somebody disagrees with me, or they've completely misunderstood me, or they don't have the same thought as me, which is completely fine. And I think this is, just before the call, this is exactly what we were talking about, right? Where it's easy to say that, this person isn't sick because they don't do X, Y, and Z, or that person is extra sick because they do X, Y, and Z, right? I think we're always so busy looking to compare, right? And I think comparison, if we're doing the comparison by any means.
I even have it now where when you see somebody and you genuinely are thinking, oh, that person did great at this thing. And the fact that they did it, either you can think, okay, they did it, that means now I should be able to do it. But where does that change into it turning into jealousy? Because I think that is a big kind of a way of motivating yourself. Like throughout school, most people, they're not like trying to do good at things for the sake of, oh, I want to do it for my own betterment and I want to be good at that thing. Most of the time is you've seen either somebody older than you or somebody around your age doing and performing at that, whether it be football, whether it be music, whatever it is. You see them, you think, oh, they're better than me at that thing. That either causes you pain, because you think, why are they better than me at that thing? Or then that kind of converts into a fire that, okay, now I'm going to do it. And I think the where you trip up is, okay, I'm going to do it because I want to show that person up. Then I think you've fallen into the trap of ego. From a worldly perspective, you've fallen into the trap because you're never going to get a sense of satisfaction because you're always going to find somebody that's better than you. And then there's the other side is you use that as a stepping stone for your self-improvement because for whatever reason, it's what we use as a building block.
I was thinking about this after our last conversation, and I was thinking, well, maybe if we just pause and before we give an answer, I'm always so quick, and I think there's so many people that be a testament to this, like, they can attest to this, that I will just give an answer straight, that whatever rolls off my tongue, it'll just be straight. If I'm in a state of contemplation about something and I'm thinking about something, I will have that conversation out loud with somebody else. And I think it can come across that maybe I'm a non-believer at times, or maybe I'm not this. But it's always, I think it's a good thing to sort of pause and reflect before you give an answer. How do you ego check yourself at times?
Gurbani talks about that the true warrior is the one that dies fighting with this mind. And I think if there's one takeaway is that we have to one day start that fight. And Saguruji talks about if you spend your whole life asleep, and I don't think there they mean physically, like there's not like this ultimate Kumbhakaran sitting somewhere that is asleep all the time. I think it's talking about people that are not actively doing self-analysis. And I think that self-analysis is quite important.
Last year, I was going through a period of time where joined a new company, so there's an expectation of, this guy's joined recently, he's got to perform. It was a project which was highly, highly critical for the business. It involved hundreds of people, people that had been hired in to deliver essentially a system upgrade. On paper, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a multi-million-pound worth project, which fell initially. There were two project managers delivering this, and then for whatever reason, the other project manager left the company, resigned. So I was the one that was left delivering it. And I think this story came to my mind because I remember having conversations with my wife that throughout the delivery, there were so many challenges that either the quality of the code, the quality of the delivery wasn't what we expected. So we had to spend extra money, extra time, extra hours, people working late into the night, 12 o'clock, sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to finish testing this product so we could meet a very tangible deadline that if we didn't meet that, there would be there'd be financial implications. Yeah, there'd be legal implications because this is a government project, and there would be actual customers during winter who wouldn't have access to gas and electricity. So this is potentially going to impact their people's well-beings in their homes because of the work that we do. So if we didn't get this delivered by the end of the year, then that's the problem that we're facing. And I remember having to check myself every day and thinking before going into every call, like, what is my expectation at the end of this call, after this half an hour, what am I hoping to achieve? And if that call didn't meet my expectation, how do I deal with that initially? What is my next step? How do I get to the outcome that I want, right? And then if that outcome didn't happen, how do I manage my emotional state because of that not happening and all this pressure that's on me? How do I deal with that? And my resolution was sitting down and closing my eyes, sitting down and just reminding myself who is actually in control, and doing that with Nam and doing Simran, that this is what my gurus taught me, that you are not the doer. You are not the one that's in control. All you can do is your best. And I think back to how Arjun must have felt when Krishan Ji was saying, do what you need to do, but you're not the one in control, right? Your job is to fire the arrow. My job is to answer that call, have that conversation. Whatever comes out of it, you leave that to the divine will of the universe or whatever. If you're not a believer, the universe or time.
Right? Really hard concept.
It's a really hard thing to do because when you have that mounting pressure of your manager saying, what's happening with this risk, or how are you managing this issue? And that's the illusion of the corporate world, that the expectation is that you are in control of these risks and issues.
It's a really good segue talking about Arjun. When Arjun, he's talking to Krishan, and obviously a lot of people don't know, but Arjun, before Arjun starts seeing Krishan as Parameshwar, they were actually very close as friends at first. And I think that's a good basis of understanding eventually what becomes the conversation of the Gita. And one thing to bear in mind is first, Arjun, the thing that starts and what makes him ask all these questions is because he starts to see the truth of the world. And it actually says he starts to realize the truth of the world is that I've created all of these expectations around me, that these are my brothers, this is my guru. And and I've spent all my life thinking that this is what it was, and I'm the one that's going to go and destroy it. And it says that Arjun's hair stands up on end when he actually starts to realize that I should become the cause of this. And he starts saying, I'm going to kill my brothers, that's going to be a sin. I'm going to kill my gurus, that's going to be a sin. All of these people are going to die meaninglessly, that's going to be a sin. And he says this whole speech about sin. And Krishan's response to him saying all of this was just to laugh at him.
Do you know what? I think laughter is the medicine in Gurbani, because when Indra Devta comes to Bhagavati and like explains that all these issues, I've lost my kingdom and everything's taken over. What does
She just
Durga Mata
laughs.
do?
Yeah,
Just
she just
laughs
laughs.
at him.
And the reason Krishan laughs in this context is he says, you've become a pragyavadi, meaning you've become a very good preacher. You've become an expert of saying this is right and this is wrong. But that doesn't mean that what's about to happen is not going to happen. That you can come up with all of these speeches, and we do it every day. We say, okay, I don't want to be involved in this. Like, for example, in your example, Baji, there's examples where you could look at saying, I'm in this situation, let me just ignore it. Right? And you can never look at it like that. Like, for example, you get this understanding, or like a very top level understanding of Gurbani. Somebody might come to the conclusion where Saguri says, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. What's the point of you doing anything? And I think if we take that as the takeaway, we've gone wrong somewhere. Because in this example where Arjun gives this whole speech and Krishan first response is just to laugh, then says, okay, you're really good at giving speeches. But then Krishan is saying, but that doesn't mean you can't act. And that doesn't mean you can stop making action. Because you stopping making action is also going to be sin.
I remember, Juan, you giving a presentation, and there were three questions that you ask yourself if you have no knowledge of what's happened before and you've just woken up on a train, right? And there's three questions that you ask yourself. One is, where am I? Where am I going? And then the third one was, who am I?
Yeah, or where am I going to end up? Where does this journey end up?
In life, we are on this train, right? We are in a situation in any given moment, regardless of whether you have the time in that situation to reflect on how did I get here, or whether you do that after the fact. There's always that opportunity to look at, how did I get here? Now, what is my next step? How do I act? Do I act in an expectation? So in my example, I'm in a situation where I have this pressure from work that I need to be able to deliver something, right? That's the expectation put on me. How I act in order to do that, is that in a way that I make people, I am arrogant? You know, am I forceful? Am I indifferent of people's lives? Like, do I expect my team to work until 1 o'clock every single day? You know, how do I show compassion? How do I show understanding and respect to the people I work with? There's always an opportunity to do that reflection every single day, to understand if it's my ego that's driving me, or whether I'm understanding the situation I'm in, and how do I work around that.
Well, I think that's the perfect observation, that in every scenario, whether you're in a work setting, whether you're in a family setting, whether you're in the setting of the Sadh Sangat, is if you turn that switch on, you have the opportunity to do that in all of these situations, where you have this opportunity for everything to become bhakti.
Kind of playing devil's advocate here is that, what if in a work scenario or a family scenario, you've been wronged by somebody and someone's backstabbed you to get ahead?
That is backstabbing the identity that you attach yourself to, right? That person is essentially doing what they're supposed to do. In the same way, if you're actually being Arjun in this circumstance, your identity is hurt, but essentially it means absolutely nothing. And I know it's easy for me to say, but it actually means nothing. Like, think about it. Somebody's backstabbed you. They've done something completely horrible, completely horrendous to you. Your identity feels hurt. But you as a person, you're still breathing. You're still being able to walk and have food, or, have sustenance and carry on with your life. You're still going to have to go to work tomorrow morning. You're still going to have to do all of that other stuff. If you're burdening your mind, and if you're burdening your thought process with such thoughts, I think it kind of detracts and I'm thinking about we're talking about ego right now, but it depends on how tall your building is built up, right? If you've got a massive, tall ego, if it falls down, it's gonna hurt more, right? But if your ego is, and again, I'm talking like this is, I am saying this like it's easy to do. I know people are going to hurt you, and I know people are going to hurt your sentiment. And as Jawan Singh was saying earlier, you do something to strive to be better, either for yourself or out of competition or out of ambition. I think one of the things that was spoken about on the Dora quite a bit was, is it wrong to have ambition? Now, it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are on this.
The reality of everything is that everything is the play of the one. And let's say from a knowledge perspective, somebody's told me that now, that everything is the one, and what you're saying that is your identity. All of this is mithya, all of this is maya, and in some places is even referred to as the ego. Okay, we've understood that now. Then the question comes is, everything is this play, and if I want to destroy the ego, we start thinking that means I have to destroy what I think is myself. You run into this paradox, and the paradoxical question becomes that you're saying to me that everything is the play of the one. So then if somebody comes and attacks me, that means that what is coming to attack me is also the one. Does that mean I should just let the one attack me and I just die? Because my guru taught me that the one is in them as well.
Paikaniya paradox.
Yeah, and the Paikaniya paradox is where people think that Paikaniya ji, they're looking everywhere and they're seeing Guru Gobind Singh Ji's body everywhere. I think that makes no sense. How can they look at everybody and they're just saying Guru Gobind Singh Ji? It goes beyond the body of Guru Gobind Singh Ji. They're not in this VR simulation where everybody starts looking like Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and he has no knowledge that this is the Khalsa and this is the Mughal Raj. It doesn't work like that. What he starts saying is, my purpose within this has now changed. It's realizing that every action I take, the aim of that action has to change. And the direction of it changes. So you start looking at your actions when we talk about karam. You start looking at your karam as this stepping stone to getting to the point of gyan, of wisdom. If you don't look at it in that way, you just internalize the paradox, and you start playing out life in a way that's not realistic.
See, even what I said, I feel that this is very theoretical. Now, it's really hard. Like, if you think about it, this feels like we're talking textbook right now. Is there any sort of experiences that you've had personally? I know, Asa, you've given us an example at work, where you let things almost play out as they're supposed to play out, but you can only do as much as you can do, right? If I'm summarizing that correctly.
Absolutely. It was like a roller coaster. I was sat there, and all I could do was put my hands up and just enjoy the ride.
John Singh, have you had any experiences that you can share with us?
Just last year during the Dora, I had prepared, I thought I had prepared that I was going to do a talk on stage. And you come and you think, okay, I've memorized X, Y, Z, Gurbani, Panktiyan, and I've got this whole flow ready in my head. And you go and you sit there, and your mind's blank. And the same Pankti that you've said 100 times, 200 times, you get to the point where you needed that Pankti. It needed to come out with crisp flow, and you get stuck. Right? And you feel like your mind's playing tricks on you, because you think, why now? Like, out of all times, like, why did it have to be now? And you get off stage and it dawns on you that I've done all of this preparation. I thought that it was going to play out in this way, and it just didn't play out how I wanted it. After that moment where you realize you're not in control, and you're not the ultimate decider of you can do that preparation. Your own body, your own mind will fail you. And how do you reconcile with that? And how do you realize that actually I'm not in control? I think that's when you start, when we're talking, going back to this jigyasa concept, this wanting to be aware. I think those that are aware, they slowly move away from these afflictions, because they're not relying on what we rely on. But we rely on something that's very fickle. And we rely on our preparation, we rely on sometimes even our confidence. We was talking about our ambition. We rely on the ambition. And then at the end of all of this, when you're going back and you're sitting down and you're getting the cold sweats from the embarrassment, you realize that actually I didn't need all of that to be the foundation. Those were meant to be the vehicles. The ambition was meant to be the vehicle to get me to a certain point. The confidence was meant to be a vehicle for me to get to a certain point. But we start associating that, no, that is what's going to enable me. And then to reconcile that afterwards, you need to you need to humble yourself, because there's no other option. Otherwise, I can go even more into the ego trap and say I can start blaming it on the mic. I can start blaming it on
the sound guy.
on the
blame the sound guy. The iPad. It's iPad.
I can start blaming it on the weather. I can start blaming it on the asam that I was sitting on. I can blame it on lack of sleep. I can blame it on a million different things. But really, I'm not going to get anywhere by blaming it on all of those things. So how do I move forward? And it goes back to what I was saying about you wanting to protect yourself. You realize I just need to keep on moving forward. I need to keep making the actions, because that's what's going to get me somewhere. Otherwise, now I'm just going to sit there rolling in the mud.
That's the big revelation, isn't it? That there's two routes that you can take out of an experience. One is you learn from it, grow from it, or you suffer from it and you have something to blame. And I think that blame then feeds the ego, that I was wronged and this happened to me. I think aspirations, what we were talking about, are really, really important. Because that is what drives you to either better yourself, better your family, better society. But it has to start with, like they say, charity starts from home. You know, I was listening to a Maskeen Ji reel on Instagram, and they said, "Why are you worried about everything that's going on in the world? Why do you not trust that the Creator has it in control? Why do you feel like you are the one that has to change the world? Whereas, why don't you focus on yourself and your personal growth?" I think having aspirations is important, but having an expectation to the outcome of that aspiration, I think, is then that two-prong. You could either take that in your stride and develop from that, or you can then start resenting that this was my expected outcome. Why didn't it happen? I was thinking back to when I was in college, and I remember there was one girl who was very, very determined to become a pharmacist. And college in the UK is, as you guys know, 2 years normally. She spent 4 years in college doing retakes to try and get into pharmacy. Kudos to her, stuck to it. And my family's expectation of me was always that Dr. Mannaya. My GCSEs and everything, I was indoctrinated to think that I was going to become I was going to go to uni, do medicine, become a doctor. My thought process in college was I did chemistry, biology, history, and IT as an A-level. So my expectation was that if I get the grades in the first year, I was going to go to do medicine. Realized quite quickly after the end, middle of year one, that I didn't have the grades for medicine, and I was too late to apply for medicine because you have to apply really early. And I hadn't done any of the extracurricular work that they expect you to do to apply for medicine. I missed the boat on that one. And I remember having a conversation with one of my teachers. She was really, really nice. I can't remember her name now, but she said, "Have you considered doing computer science, because you're really good in that?" And I remember thinking, how do I explain this to my mum and dad? I'm going to work on computers. And I remember putting together a presentation for my mum, trying to convince her of the pros and cons of doing computer science. It was never part of the plan. Do you know what I mean? So, and the one Gurbani took that time and time again in any situation always makes me laugh is "Matta kare pacham ke tai, purab hi le jaat." That we have this plan that's set in some kind of sandstone. It's not even stone, it's sandstone, right? Because it could change tomorrow. That I'm going to become this, I'm going to do this. But life has a different plan for you. And whether you take that in your stride, that will enable you to develop yourself and grow from that. And the alternative is really, I think, not being around the bush is suffering.
Yeah, 100%. I think one story I'll share is like now, a lot of my day to day, like I love reading. And but when I was in school, it wasn't presented to me in a way that made it interesting to me. Like for me, I always needed to see a practicality out of something for it to be interesting to me. Otherwise, it just felt like we was wasting our time. So I've gone all through school, all through secondary school. And as we all know, you need a certain grade to get into university in your English and maths. So maths I was okay, and I had failed my English. Because I just never paid attention. I never saw it never interested me or never like sparked my attention. So I failed it in secondary school. And I've gone to like applying for my A levels. And this is one thing that I always relied upon is I didn't do well there. And obviously the requirements to get into the A levels were for you to have a C in English, which I didn't have. So I've gone to apply for my A levels, and I've gone to speak to them in person saying, look, I know I didn't do well in my English, but trust me, my English, my English is fine.
I am speaking English now.
I am speaking. So I've tried to convince them, and for whatever reason, they've trusted me. So I've got into my first year of A levels, and the whole like basis of them letting me stay was during that year you retake your GCSE English, and if you pass, you can stay. Right. So I've gotten into the retake, and I think, okay, I've prepared this time. Right. So I've done it. Even at this point, my parents even knew. So I've gone and done it. And the day the results come, I've not passed the retake, and I'm off by 1 mark. And in that moment, I'm like you're saying, you come up with all these plans that you don't care about yourself. You're thinking, how am I going to explain this to my parents? And so I've thought of this plan that I knew they said I have to do it within that year. So there was one opportunity to do the test in, I think, early Jan, and then there was another opportunity to do it before the end of the year. So I said, I'll do another retake. Because I'm going to do that retake, I'm going to pass that 100%. This is what I'm telling myself. I'm going to pass that 100%. So I've come home and told everybody I passed.
Double down on it.
So I doubled down on the confidence. And I thought, okay, I have to pass this last one. And I put myself in this situation. So I've gone into this last retake, and if I don't pass, I'm finished. So
deported back to India.
Yeah.
That's it.
But this was not going to be by customs; it was going to be by my parents. So yeah, I've gone in to do that retake, and imagine the amount of added pressure I had given myself for no reason. But in my mind, it was a better strategy. So I've gone into the retake, and Sach Bhai Kirpa de Naal, I've passed this third retake. So I've come home, and I've said, Mata Pitaji, I've passed my English. And they said,
forgetting
that I had already... No, I already knew. I said, I'm going to have to tell them eventually. Because even that was eating me up inside, that I've been lying to them all these months. They're thinking, Sada Munda, Padha Likhya, he knows English. Unbeknownst to them, I didn't even know English. So I've come home and I've said to them, I know I said that I passed early in the year. I passed now. Congratulations. And you get this look of like, should we be happy or not? And the reason I'm saying this whole story is I think that's a perfect example of life, isn't it? That we make these expectations, certain parts of those expectations, we convince ourselves that we completed it, even though deep down we know we didn't. And then eventually, when you do complete it, there's not going to be anyone there to congratulate you. And I think there's something in that. There's something in that, of that realization. But I only realize this now. At the time, obviously, I wasn't thinking in that way.
So essentially, your ego, or the use of your ego, or the understanding of the illusion of ego, shrinks under awareness. So once you understand what you're doing, and saying, oh well, that person's not that great at that really, but that they've done something. At least they've done something, right? Instead of appreciating and being grateful that something's happened, you will make a narrative and say, well, they're like that anyway. You know what I mean? Or that person's, you'd have that spitefulness. And I think that spitefulness allows you to protect your own ego. But if you actually are aware of your own ego, you'll stop yourself. And I think there was something, I think we've mentioned it a few times on this. It's ego traps.
Just before, one ego trap, which whilst you were talking there, Sereb, about being aware of how you're talking, is one that I've heard a lot. Is they'll say "Kya nahi chahiye tha?" But
No, they'll just lay it after.
So why say it then? "Kya nahi chahiye tha?" But no, don't say it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
That's an ego trap. That's a definite one.
No, and they will drill someone. And and then no. At the end, they'll say, "Chalo koi gal nahi."
Yeah. Full bestie and then chalo.
Yeah.
Oh, we Rab da banda hai.
Yeah,
I think that's a way of actually, if you think about it, if you say "Uvi Rabda Banda," in a way, in a twisted way,
But not after you've done their full bestie.
yeah, probably.
What I was going to say, it's about understanding what we mean by what we build up in this world of consciousness, because it exists. It's just hard to grab and put your hand on it, because it's not something that exists physically. Like even when Kabirji is talking about heaven and hell, because all of our experience, when you're barmukhi, meaning when you're outward, everything in your life, you define it by its physicality. You can either touch it, you can hear it, you can smell it. And we think of heaven and hell in the same way. We think we're going to go into this really nice garden with this flowing river. And then the way we visualize hell is this fire. But when we think of it, our consciousness isn't something you can physically touch. So even when we're talking about heaven and hell, it exists, but not in the way we think things exist.
One thing that Eckhart Tolle was saying, I think Asa sent something in the group, but ego focuses on what is lacking. Yeah. So even what you were talking about, Joanne, saying where we're saying, the separation part, that we always feel like we're not connected. That's the lacking. But as soon as we shift that thought process into gratefulness, then we have an abundance. Then there's a limitless amount of blessings. There's a limitless amount of gratitude. But there will always be a limited amount of ego. It's like, now I've got a Ferrari, right? You got a Ferrari. Instead of being grateful that you got a Ferrari, you'll be like, well, why haven't I got a Lamborghini? Or why haven't I got 3 other Ferraris or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's really good, actually. It even connects to the definition of Brahm, where when you're saying the word Brahm, I actually didn't realize this is what it meant. But the meaning of Brahm is even bigger. It's actually a denotion. It's not actually like it's not a descriptive word, if that makes sense. Like, for example, is it this? No, bigger than that. Is it this? Bigger than that. Is it Sarab? No, bigger than that. Is it this earth? No, it's bigger than that. Is it bigger than this universe? Is it the universe? No, bigger than that. And I think it's like what you're saying. Once you go to the concept of where there's no end of the abundance, then you unlock something.
I remember there was a conversation, I think it might have been on Satpal, the Nanak Naam channel, and he was having a conversation with somebody who had been in depression for at least 20 years or something, quite a long time, being depressed, going through their personal challenges and personal problems. And then they got to a point where they had an experience with Japji Sahib, and not even like the entirety of it, but they said the beginning, the Mool Mantar, where it says Nirpao and Nirvair, and these two attributes of Akal, and like you're saying, Juand, being able to then open up that box and aim for something bigger than yourself. She realized that instead of focusing on all of the internalized issues and problems that she'd been facing, she decided to focus on something that was a lot bigger than herself, that I am fearless. I have no enmity anymore. And by focusing on that, and like you're saying, by focusing on the gratitude, it opens you up to this whole new wider possibility. And there was a video that I was watching today, and this girl who's taking her dog for a walk, she said, what is the one thing that I can reflect on today that makes today the best day of my life? Yeah, and she said by doing that, by asking that question to herself, it grounds her and makes her appreciate what's making today the best day of her life. And you forget, like you say, from that timeline, you forget the past and all of the things that have happened, because today is the best day of your life, instead of focusing on all of the negative that's happened before and worrying about what's coming around the corner or tomorrow.
Before this podcast started, we were saying, Balwant Baji's episode got 11,000 views or whatever. And it's always this, why isn't that 15,000? Or why isn't that 150,000? Whereas, yeah, if we're going to live in the gratefulness, like you were saying, that lady was saying, that everything, like how are we living in the moment? How are we essentially living for now rather than living for, I don't know, the next 1,000 likes or the next, yeah. I mean, nobody's seen tomorrow, right?
I like how we've got to this kind of natural conclusion of it's the limited versus the limitless. And there's elements where we need to give up the things that we see as and are essentially limited, and connect with the things that are limitless. And it even comes up in, for example, the word comes up again and again around upadhi. And upadhi, the definition of that word is adding a limit to something, where you add a limit to something, and it's referred to as a disease of spirituality, a disease of getting to a place of wisdom. And I think these are just natural, like practical ways that people have realized that.
You go into Sangat, right? So when we sit in Sangat, if we look around, there's always people who are there before us, right? So I think Asa has given this example before, with Birmingham not having Gurdwara. And, there's always somebody there from like 5 o'clock setting up, doing the Chadran de Bishai, doing the stage setup, doing everything. And if you actually turn up there, you always think, well, okay, there's someone who's done a lot more than me. And if you're there and you're stuck saying, I've done my 1 hour Nam Simran, you can always turn around and say, well, someone got up at 1 o'clock this morning and they done like 18 hours in the whole day. And what is this 1 hour that you get stuck on? I think if you are going to compare yourself, I think always compare yourself in awe to other people, in the sense that that person has the opportunity to do something, or, you've also got the same time, everyone's still got the same amount of 24 hours in a day. Are you using that opportunity? Are you using those 24 hours in a way that sort of detracts from you, or a way that sort of can help society?
Even if you think of, okay, I've got these 100 virtues, he says, Saguruji says that you would then talk to somebody that you view, and Sajbai uses that word, that you view as somebody that only has 5. And you think, okay, that person is somebody that is not worthy. I shouldn't even talk to that person. And then Saguruji pauses there and then says, but a Sikh of mine, or a Guru's Sikh, he will be somebody that goes to that person, sits with that person, takes those extra 5 gurna, those extra 5 virtues, and becomes somebody with 105.
Having somebody that you are devoted to as a bhagat, that you are in love with, whether that's the Nirgun Sarup of Akal Purakh, or whether that's the Sargun Sarup of Akal Purakh, because as we know, Har and Harbhajan, Dui Ek hai, they're both one. There's no difference between Har and Harbhajan. Only a devotee can experience that, by Kanhaiya Ji, it's not that they had this VR headset on, like you said, Juan, that they saw Guru Gobind Singh Ji in everyone. That love that they had for Guru Gobind Singh Ji, that he exists within everyone, that was what drove them and motivated them. And you were asking, Sarab, what are the markers? I think, can we tolerate somebody bad-mouthing us, as a marker for how emotionally strong am I? Can I tolerate somebody doing that to me? Can I tolerate somebody talking behind my back? And then from our Hukamnama from Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji, it's such a big thing. Ki even if someone hits you, physically hurts you, can you still forgive them? And Bayatar Singh Ji's Sakhi comes to mind, where they were attacked at the Maghi Mela. And instead of falling into the trap of, I want my revenge and I'm going to do this and that to this person that attacked me, the guy who attacked Bayatar Singh Ji was taken ill and was probably going to die. And instead of leaving them to die, they took them in, took care of them, gave them water, gave them food, gave them shelter, and helped them get back to 100% health. Putting that into a real world scenario where you can go through life's ups and downs, family problems, work problems, relationship problems, and accepting. That acceptance only comes when you have fallen in love with your creator or your guru. Because otherwise, who are you? Tu hi mere naal kar raha. You are the cause of this. Otherwise, the alternative is I am the cause of this.
That I mean, playing devil's advocate, is that a get out of jail free card, where if you're the creator and you're doing all this to me and I've got no part to play, or
in one element it's saying tu karta karna main nahi jaho kari na hoy. Even if I tried, I can't do anything. But on the other sense, in on a different page, on a different ang, Sach Pashaji writes, what I have done, I now reap the reward of that. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji backs this up, saying, ho which aya, ho which gaya, ho which hasya, ho which roya. That everything I've done up until this point has been in ignorance through my ego. So if I've done something, that's the dos na deyo ki se dos karma apna jo main kiya so main paya. What I have done has been the thing that I have done, my ego. Through my ego I have done, so I can't blame anyone. Jo main kiya, so main paya, dos na dija avarjana. But there is a force behind all of that. Like we discussed earlier, ki matta kare pacham getai, that was through my ego. But pura bhi le jaat. But there was a guiding force of my beloved who I was ignorant to, who was guiding me in a different direction. So I may make every attempt to try and do something through my ego, but whether that results in something, if it doesn't result in my expectation, then I have a problem and I'm suffering. But I have the opportunity to reflect on that experience and say, Hey Prabhu, hey mere Malak, ye teri raja aasegi.
But really, all of this then becomes a paradox. All of it then becomes the like the snake and the rope analogy. Whereas as soon as then it happens in this click, Sagarji was mentioned the Gurbani tok ek chet jeh ek chin te ayo kaal fas ke beech na ayo, meaning ek chin. It happens like this, where you realize the truth of reality. But that is going to happen via your actions. And that's why it says, Darupi Ismai. That even though you then see the knowledge that I'm going to have to use my actions that are false, are hankar, but I'm going to use that to my benefit for me to climb to the point of where I have wisdom. And you can only do that with the blessings of your guru. Because they've done that journey and they've got to and they're at the point where you want to get to, and that point where you want to get to, you can't write that in words. Even a simple one where Jogpa Singh in his Rahatnama, he writes, Gur ka sikh ke sande ahankar kar sikhi na gavaye, meaning that you can't connect kes and sikhi in this sentence. That because if you're going to do ahankar of your kes, there's a step where that is your identity and your, but Sikhi na gawaye, that don't lose his Sikhi. What is that Sikhi that is being referred to here? I think that's a question we have to ask ourselves. I won't go through my opinions on it, but I think that question itself, par Sikhi na gawaye.
So, I mean, we spoke about a lot, and I think some things that I feel are missing when we have a conversation are takeaways. So, not takeaways as in, McDonald's, but takeaway is something that the listener or somebody who's just, browsing over this, what do we actually want to get out of this conversation? And I know, for me, awareness, and it's something that Asa said earlier, I think being able to notice ego-driven behavior, being able to pause in the moment and reflect. I know it's as hard as life is at the moment because everyone's running so fast, right? As soon as you get a text message, you want to reply to it and say something quickly. And I think in life, we want to do the same. When somebody says something to us, we want to reply really quickly. But being able to pause, reflect, listen to what's being asked, and having that awareness of, are we answering something that might, hurt somebody else, or are we answering something that might protect my own ego by the way that I answer? That's key. I think not fighting ego is another key takeaway from this. Something that, we mentioned earlier was ego shrinks under awareness. Again, it links into that awareness part. Again, service, like even seva, we didn't even touch upon seva and how, there are, certain sakis that tell us that washing the dishes off the masses, either in Sangat or outside of Sangat, how, your mind becomes more nirmal, how your mind becomes clean through acts of service, essentially. Cool. Guys, what is your fun fact for the week? Cows are able to walk upstairs but aren't able to go down without help.
There was this Singh, his name was Amar Singh Dadiwala, during the time of Maharaj Singh Ji. And he had an amazing beard, and his beard was so amazing that he was given a monthly wage just to maintain his lovely long beard.
There was a short period of time when Picasso and Snoop Dogg were alive together.
Oh yeah, Picasso died on the 8th of April 1970. Guys,
Nice.
that's been a good conversation.